Hey, welcome to episode 67 of FreshAirAtFive, the podcast. All right, as we step into this podcast, you're going to hear out of the gates Tom Schimmer and Che Cheney talking about education and life and doing the thing that we love to do. And how does Che do it after he's been doing it for so long? Also, as we step into Tuesday, I believe I was listening to Just a Teacher podcast with Trav Golter as he had on guest Kylie Captain, and she tells her story in the first part of a two-part series. So looking forward to Just a Teacher, the rest of that as that comes out later. And moving into Wednesday, can't remember. So anyhow, they're in the show notes. So go look and scroll down and listen to the show notes. Take a look at those and see what's coming up. And appreciate you being here. Tell your friends, subscribe, and share this abroad, please, so that more people can listen and we can reach more and share the love of the work the content creators are doing. All right, without further ado, episode 67, FreshAirAtFive, here we go.
I'm Josh Swartz.
And I'm William Illingworth,
hosts of the High Tech Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to FreshAirAtFive, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAtFive or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected.
Hey PLN, April 4, 2022, out for Fresh Air at 5 this morning. This might sound a little bit different because my headphones died as I was walking, but I'm going to record off the mic off my iPhone, so hopefully this comes out okay and you can hear me. Hope you're doing well today. It's Monday morning and the beginning of a week, a very full week for me, rich and full, and I'm looking forward to it so very much because later this week I get to attend a conference Wednesday evening to Friday afternoon, and so I'm really excited about that. People time for me is super important, and get to connect with some people at conferences and touch base, and also to grow myself. I'm doing a presentation on Adobe Creative Cloud Express, which I'm excited about, and also just learning and growing as a conference organizer, working with Randy Labonte and team at CanELearn. All right, so this morning as I'm out walking, it has been pretty dry until just a few minutes ago, and now it's raining and drizzling a little bit, but that's okay. It's all good. I got up, got at it. Didn't want to because I looked at the forecast last night and was like, wow, it's going to be pretty wet in the morning. Okay, I'm going to keep talking here because I could talk for a while, but I'm going to move on to the podcast I listened to this morning, episode 67 of the Tom Schimmer podcast. And this morning, as I listened, there's three sections of the podcast: the Don't At Me section, the interview section, and then assessment corner. And all three for me today were super rich, and I'll tell you why. All right, in the Don't At Me section, Tom asks us to actually at him about the difference between passion and strengths, and how do we encourage our students to chase their passions for a career as opposed to chasing their strengths. Take a listen to what Tom has to say. I really like it. And Tom, I would agree with you because I've had some pushback myself on chasing my passion, because my passions have been things like hiking and fishing and fly tying and things like that. And I think one of my strengths is teaching and education. And I'm doing that so I can do the other things that aren't burdensome. Okay, coming at you in a moment. 1 second. One more thing for April 4, 2022. Continuing my thoughts on episode 67 of the Tom Schimmer podcast. At the outset, he talked about passions and strengths, And like I just said, I think that it's important for us to follow our strengths. And I like the way you articulated it, Tom, and that you heard it said that we need to chase our strengths and find things and do things that we're good at, as opposed to the things that we're passionate about. At the very beginning of that, when you hear that, you're like, whoa, are you serious? You don't want to do something you like. I hope your strengths are things that you like, because they're easier for you than things that are hard. And my passion of fly fishing is hard. And for me to be a fly fishing guide, I probably could do it, but it would become a lot of work and wouldn't be my passion for very long. So that's my thoughts on that. The second section, he had on guest Che Cheney, Mr. Che Cheney. And Che's a co-host of the Che and FAAF podcast. And Che, I appreciated hearing your story more and more depth about you being a white male in your school district, in your school for 20 years, and the perspective that brings you. And being long in the tooth in a place isn't a bad thing. But I see and hear that you have grown and you've changed, and your journey of self-actualization and understanding who you are is important. I appreciate you, so I'm just shouting you out right now. You have made a difference for me in the way that you and Pav have talked, and just our conversations that we have had on an individual level outside of recording. And I like how you push and disrupt, and you don't settle, and you're self-driven. So that's Che Cheney, and thank you, Che, for your work and for your voice. In the very last part about being concise and having concise answers, thank you, Tom, for sharing that. I think concise is so important, and it's about fluency and literacy in an area, because if we're fluent and literate, then we can bring those concise answers. That's it for today. Have a good one. Talk to you. Bye. Okay, the last thing for April 4, 2022. So what are you listening to that challenges your thinking? Are you listening to things that you like? Are you listening to things that you agree with? Or are you listening to things that challenge your thinking and make you grow? Because if we did things that we just like to do, would we ever grow? My students are like, well, I don't like that. And I'm like, well, that's too bad. I'm not teaching you so that you like it. I'm teaching you that so you can grow. And, they're like, well, Mr. Carpenter, I wish we could just do this. And I'm like, well, let's do what I've asked you, because I think there's going to be some growth there, and that it's an important skill for you to learn. So if we just did things that we liked, I probably wouldn't be teaching. I'd probably just be fly fishing and have a job where I just, I like to do that, but it would be my passion. I'm not sure. So that's full circle on this episode of the Tom Shermer Podcast, episode 67. Go take a listen. Listen and be challenged. And, I like the way Tom brings it. He says it like he sees it. And so, Tom, hey, on this day, as you're over in Hawaii at your workshops and sessions that you're doing with the school district there, I just hope that you have a great day and enjoy the weather in Hawaii. It's drizzly here where we are, but yeah. Okay, that's all. Bye. Hey, PLN, Tuesday, April 5, 2022. Welcome to Tuesday. Man, it's Tuesday, and yesterday was a super long day for myself as I was marking and working on projects at school and communicating on behalf of my Media 11-12 students about yearbook expectations for people in our building and things I need others to do. It was a full day of communication. I messaged students all day long. I was helping students with understanding some of the solutions when they couldn't figure it out, and writing out solutions and sharing them with them, through Adobe, like creating a PDF and then sharing them with the students so that they could see them by putting them into my Google Drive. All kinds of things like that. this whole online learning is a different beast than in-seat learning when students are sitting in your classroom. And as we go through this coming week, I'm going to the CanELearn conference, which is the Digital Learning Symposium for British Columbia, and teachers like myself that are online teachers, that so that we can get together. We can talk about practice and best practice and how we do things and be there for one another and have a support network. And I've been going to this for a number of years. That leads me into what I just listened to this morning, which is a new to me podcast. And it is the High Tech Podcast with William Illingworth and Josh Schwartz. And these two guys have joined the Educational Podcast Network to bring us their thoughts about EdTech and high-tech education. And thank you, gentlemen, for your thoughts. I really appreciate it. Hey, welcome to my world of Fresh Air at 5. This is where I walk every day and listen to podcasts. And I'm going to shout you guys out today. And I'm saying to everybody that's listening to me, go subscribe to High Tech Podcast. That's the High Tech Podcast. And you can find it on your podcatcher, find their website. And it's HITECH. Okay, coming at you. I got more to say. Hang on. I'll be right back. One more thing for April 5, 2022. As I was saying, I started listening to a new to me podcast, High Tech Podcast with Will and Josh. And gentlemen, thanks so much for your thoughts. And you guys are wrapping up, and I caught the very final segment of a 4-part series. It's a mini series, and it's the last of the 4 part series about accelerated learning. And as I walked into this, I'm like, oh yeah, accelerated learning. That's where you learn stuff fast. And it has to do with going beyond micro learning and taking a traditional accredited course and squishing it, extruding it through an 8-week screen as opposed to the regular 14 to 20 weeks that it could be traditionally taught in. So I think about myself in this manner as, students come to my school and they go, oh, I'm going to finish this course in 8 weeks, chemistry 12. Senior chemistry, they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm good at chemistry, I can do this. And they get at it, and then they go, whoa, that's really hard. And I go, yeah, I told you it was hard. And they're like, well, no, it's like, but there's so much work. And I'm like, yeah, you need to do so much work because this is a senior science course for, credits for your transcript for graduation from high school. And, their expectations, and how do we advertise the work that we do? And Josh and Will in this episode talk about 4 takeaways about instructor support and having the right instructors in place and training them, about having manageable course content so that it might not be all of the course content in the depth that you would if you did it in a semester length. Also advertising it properly so that students are not coming and going, oh yeah, online learning's so easy. Well, if your learning management system's a mess and things are not organized, it's not so easy. And the 4th thing that they talked about was consistency within your course and across the platform so that students can know what to do. So you need to have course development teams that get together and talk about themes and things like that, and it's so very important. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate this. I'm going to share this with my PLN and CanELearn because they got to hear it. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon. Bye. Hey, PLN, April 6, 2022. It's Wednesday morning. It's plus 1 degree Celsius. And fortunately, the wind's not blowing. It's not raining. And I'm out for Fresh Air at 5, getting some fresh air as my day is beginning. Super psyched about today. I've got some school work to do. And then this afternoon, I get to go into a conference. I'm going into the CanELearn DLSymposium 2022, which is an in-person conference at the Delta Burnaby. Super excited about that. Work with Randy Labonte and Brad Berkowitz and others on the organizing committee to bring this to fruition. And this has been a work in progress. It's our annual conference, but with the restrictions and all the challenges that have gone on, it's been a work in progress. And we're looking forward to seeing each other and learning from each other this coming week. So it's today until Friday. All right, so this morning as I'm out walking, I listened to Just a Teacher, and I think it's episode number 49 or 46. I will have it correct in the video, and I'll have it right in my show notes. But Trav Golter out of Australia brings us content. He brings us stories of teachers and making a difference in people's lives. This episode has Kylie Captain, who is a teacher now, and she tells her story about growing up in Aboriginal Australia and in her community, and how she at young an age lost her birth mom, and since her adopted mom, and the stories that she tells about growing up and the what if. Her book is called What If, and she talks about her life and drug addiction, and a teacher that believed in her in high school and said, what if you could do something with your life? And teachers, are we those people? Are we those people that bring hope to young people? And it's not just the Indigenous young people, but it's all the young people. And I'm thankful for Indigenous education in my district and the push for that. I'm learning a whole lot. 1 second, I'll be right back. One more thing for April 6, 2022, just listening to episode 48 of Just a Teacher with Trav Golter out of Australia. Trav has Kylie Captain on, and she talks about her what if story and how, as a young person growing up in Aboriginal Australia, and the suppression and oppression, and that dark, dirty secret that Australia has, and those stories of Australia that are very similar to the life here for Indigenous people in Canada and around the world, and just how we need to take time to become aware. And I'm thankful for my awareness growing and my compassion changing. And I've got some Indigenous heritage in me out of the United States, and I don't know very much about that, and I'm learning about that. And I grew up in white Canada, as a young kid that's got some color, some African American. But you know what? I don't understand my roots very much because I grew up in white Canada. And I'm thankful for my upbringing. I'm thankful for the opportunities that I've had. And as an educator, I need to make sure that I'm providing opportunities for all of my students and not just some of my students. And so Indigenous education is so key and critical. And our Indigenous education department in our district here in Abbotsford is working really hard to make sure that all of us have an understanding of our Indigenous community around us. Initiative was put in place, and I don't know all of the exact details, but all students in Abbotsford are going to need to take an Indigenous education course in the future in order to graduate as a grad requirement, I believe. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that, and I believe that we are making an impact on the young people, and we have to be intentional about that and be genuine about how we care about our students. Thank you, Kylie, for sharing your story. Looking forward to listening to part 2 on episode 49 of Just a Teacher podcast, coming out probably in 2 weeks, right, Trav? All right, we'll talk to you soon. Have a fabulous day. I'm going to try to listen to one more before I get home. Okay, bye. Hey, the last thing for April 6, 2022, I just listened to episode 774 of the 10-Minute Teacher podcast with Vicki Davis. And Vicki brings us the idea of surprise today, because she was talking with Dr. Michael Rossell, who is a researcher and educator, and how he has written a book called I don't know. It's Dr. Michael Rossell. Go take a look at the show notes for episode 774, because Vicki will have it in there. But he's talking about surprise, and how surprise is one of those things that, when used effectively with learners, can heighten a learning experience. When someone's surprised about something and then you capture their attention from that surprise, they can learn a lot of things, and there's a connection there that wouldn't be if they weren't surprised. Consider for yourself, what's something that you've learned that's been of significance, that was there a surprising event that occurred when that happened? Okay, here's an example for you. I'm out in my boat rainbow trout fishing, and everything is all good and groovy. I've got a fish on the line, bringing it in, and then all of a sudden, it starts pulling like crazy. I'm like, whoa, that is a big fish. It's a big, big fish. And then all of a sudden, it comes in a whole lot easier. I'm like, what's going on? And a loon pops up way out there, just beyond where the fish is, because the loon has grabbed the fish. Was I surprised? I was. What am I learning right at this very moment? There is a loon in the water chasing the fish that I've got on the hook, and I gotta figure out how to keep that from happening in the future, being aware of the loon, and how do I deal with a fish that I catch so quickly. All right, so thank you, Vicky. Thanks for bringing us the element of surprise today and talking about how surprise is important for phasic dopamine and learning in our classrooms, and how we can use it to surprise our students and encourage and grow them. All right, have a fabulous day, all. Talk to you. Bye. Hey PLN, it's Thursday, April 7, 2022. I'm out for Fresh Air at 5 and not in my neighborhood. This doesn't look like where I walk. I'm walking out here in Burnaby, British Columbia, because I am currently attending the CanELearn DLSymposium that's happening at the Delta Burnaby Hotel. And so, as we are out for the conference, I'm out for this conference with some of my peeps from school and running into people from, other districts and all over the province, and people I haven't seen face to face in has it been maybe three years now because of the pandemic. It's been fantastic to reconnect, even just last night as we just got our warmer-upper keynote session, and now as we are into today, it's early in the morning for me, 5:14 a.m. Got up and got to get out, get some fresh air at 5, and do some professional learning for myself before we jump into the day with all of our friends at the conference for the different sessions. All right, this morning as I'm walking, I listened to the Wired Educator episode 222 as Rich Chiz is the guest with Kelly Croy on the Wired Educator. And Kelly, you are such an amazing interviewer. I really enjoyed my recent interview with you a couple weeks ago, and that just came out. And it's fantastic to hear how you draw things out of your guests, and you have them talk about their passions, and the interview just flows so naturally. Riches, thank you so much for sharing your story about you writing this book and professional development, and the struggle that it is as a leader to bring professional development and to hope that there are recipients. And as a teacher here, we have to take hold of our own professional development. There's only so much that our administrators can do, and we have to have a growth mindset in ourselves. Fantastic. I like your ideas about the willing, the unwilling, and the unable, and how can we reach those 3 different groups for professional development. All right, gents, talk to you soon. Gotta listen to another one. Bye. One more thing for April 7, 2021. Continuing my walk here in Burnaby, British Columbia for Fresh Air at 5 this morning, I just came across EA Sports. I just saw EA back there. Like, that's where they make video games. Super rad. And so anyhow, this neighborhood that I'm in, this is near BCIT now. Well, previously when I was recording, I was over by, where was I? I was over by the Lougheed Highway. And anyhow, it's just interesting to be in a different space. And what do you see in the morning? Like, what do you see when it's quiet compared to if you're just driving around in your vehicle? And so that's why I like to get out and walk. And it's pretty cool to be here. So out here for my walk. And I listened to episode 221 of Teachers on Fire with Tim Cavey. And Tim brings us a blog post that he wrote about how to give yourself permission to stop chasing missing work. That's not the title. I think the how-to isn't there. But the point is, he talks about missing work in our classroom spaces and how we need to stop chasing the minutia of the missing work. Chase and make sure that students are being productive. But if students miss like a spelling test on a Friday, do you need to chase down that one spelling test? It reminds me of a movie I saw back when I was younger about the I can't remember the movie. It was one of those teen movies from the 80s, but the guy in the movie was the paper boy, and one of his paper people didn't give him his $1.25, and he was like a dog on a bone trying to get that, $1.25 for his paper route from the resident, and just how he was just insatiable about that. We as teachers can be like that. We can get pretty insatiable about, chasing down the missing work. In my space as an online teacher, it is important that students do their work because of the volume of work that we give them is so little compared to if we had the daily grind of, like spelling tests every week. Listen to Tim's thoughts. There's positives and negatives for doing that, and it's about teacher well-being and student well-being. All right, talk to you. The last thing for April 7, 2022 is I'm wrapping up Fresh Air at 5 now. I'm getting back to the Delta Burnaby right there. And I've walked about 7 kilometers this morning around this neighborhood. And so I just listened to 3 questions that inspire inspired educators on the Innovators Mindset podcast with George Koros. And hey, big shout out to George. George, my Twitter journey started when I was attending this conference in 2010 when you were keynoting with your brother, and it's changed my life. So thank you for keynoting that day, because I wouldn't be where I am today if you weren't there to help get that Twitter journey going. But anyhow, so you were talking with Brian Faulkner, and the 3 questions that you ask about a teacher that inspires, an administrator that inspires, and then some advice you give to your first year self or something like that. And Brian talked about being student-centered as that advice, and it's important that we remember that we're there for our students. And we have to take time for making sure that we are getting things done. But if the students are not the center of why we're doing all the things that we're doing, then we're just doing a job and pushing students through and not caring. So caring is so important. That is so absolutely important. So thanks so much, gentlemen, for the inspiration this morning. And thank you, George, again. Thank you, George, for making a difference in this guy's space. All right, peace. Got to go and do some other things now. Okay, bye. Hey, PLN, Friday, April 8, 2022, out for Fresh Air at 5 and not in my neighborhood. So I'm out in Burnaby. I'm out at the conference now at CanELearn at the Delta Burnaby Hotel, and it's been a fantastic conference, great connection, meeting people face to face. Like, oh my goodness, it's so fantastic to be out at the conference and learning about technology and digital learning and the way we do things in our online spaces. It's so good. So out for my walk this morning. A bit later, I slept in. Oh my goodness. Woke up at 5:30 instead of 4:30 like I typically do. But the great thing about that is I get to enjoy the daylight as I'm walking. So I'm out here at West Deer Lake Park in Burnaby near BCIT, and enjoying some nature away from all the roads and the metropolitan of this area. So it's a beautiful place. And so I listened to EdTech Distilled podcast this morning. I can't remember the episode number, but I will have it in the show notes. I will have it on the tweet as well. But it was the episode where Adam and Dave are talking with Michael Drezick about redefining digital citizenship and how we need to look at technology integration into our spaces, not out of a place of fear, but out of a place of utility and of goodness that we can use with that. But in the process, bringing it into connection with other disciplines and getting it out of the computer lab and into everything else. Because our everything else, this cell phone that I'm recording on, doesn't stay in the computer lab. It stays with me everywhere I go, and using it for good and teaching the kids to be creative with their devices as opposed to just consumptive with their devices. All right, so fantastic to hear about you guys and what you had to say today. I appreciate that so much. Take a listen to EdTech Distilled podcast. Also, I learned that Elon Musk now owns 9.1% of Twitter. thanks Elon for allowing us to tweet and supporting this thing. All right, peace. Bye. One last thing for the week of April 4 to 8 here on Fresh Air at 5. I just wrapped up listening to episode 87 of the Ignite EdTech podcast with Craig Kemp out of Singapore, and he had on guest April Winfrey out of the Scandinavia area. I can't remember, Norway maybe. She's at an international school there, and she does work with growing inclusive technologies and integrating technology into the learning support services space, because she talked about how, it's so important that our educational assistants and teaching assistants are capable and competent with the technology, because they're working with the students that would need it the most in being able to communicate and write and do those kinds of things. At my school, I watch my EAs, and our EAs at my school, and I walk in there in an afternoon, and they're working online with students at home doing work and math over Google Meets and all these platforms that provide collaboration so that the students can, do their work. They can support them at a distance and in the building. And we need to make sure that they are being included in trainings that we do, not just the teachers. So fantastic to hear. Thank you, April, for your thoughts. Before I the previous segment, I was listening to EdTech Distilled podcast. It was episode 20. So that's episode 20 of the EdTech Distilled podcast. You talked on here, Craig, about Make Your Empire as an app that your daughter uses for creating and learning. And I'm going to have to check that out. So thanks for that. And everybody, we'll talk to you soon. Have a fabulous Friday. Bye-bye.
As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoyed this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself, because you're worth it.